Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube. As a church leader, you're being pulled in 4 different directions all at once. But the truth is, none of them really work the same way that they used to. In fact, the data shows that the organic reach on these platforms is all somewhere between 4% and as low as 0.08%. That means that best case scenario, if you have 1,000 followers on social media, only about 40 of them are going to actually see your content. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how each platform has changed over the last couple of years and which ones are becoming total dead ends for ministry. I'll share with you the pros and cons that we've unpacked and give you the exact marching orders that I would recommend that you use at your church if you want to have the biggest impact this year. Let's do this. Imagine this with me, if you will. You're putting on a giant community event. You've been doing the same event for years. You've put out flyers, you've made all the promos, you've done all the things that have worked in the past. But when the day finally comes, only a fraction of the number of people that attended last year actually attend this year. And really the issue here is that for most churches, we're spreading ourselves too thin across too many platforms. All of these platforms are so hungry, asking you to post multiple times per day in some cases. But let's face it, churches just don't have the resources in most cases to do those kinds of things. But what if I told you there is one platform that I believe you should really put all of your focus on if you want to see real growth? The question is, which one? Well, let's take a look at the platforms and break it down. Let's start with Instagram. Over the last few years, Instagram has transformed from a site that was primarily focused on photography and sharing that to heavily favoring Reels. In fact, our data shows that a typical Reel will get about 5 times the reach of a standard static post. And here's the sad thing, that even with Reels, it'll only reach about 4% of your followers. And that's the high watermark of all these channels. Instagram is not without its advantages. There's lots of things that it's great for. It's a great visual medium, and there is still some limited value in some of those static posts, specifically the carousel ones that you flip through, especially if you're not using it for photography, but for making bold statements about something you're teaching at your church. And I actually really like the demographics. It's great for reaching those young families that so many churches want to reach, because if I had to put a generation name on Instagram, I would call it the social platform for millennials. And Instagram stories still do work in some situations, but in reality, they're better for individuals than they are for brands. And your church is typically a brand. There's definitely some limitations to Instagram, like you have to be constantly creating new content. And I find that their algorithm tends to promote entertainment more than information, which isn't always what we want to do as churches. One other limitation is they don't really give you a lot of link options. So if you want to drive traffic back to your church website or maybe to a full-length sermon, it's hard to do on Instagram without the cumbersome link in bio approach that most churches wind up doing. My strategy would be to focus 80% on Reels and then 20% on static posts. Focus on creating things that are savable content. So an example would be something like 5 things to pray when you're stressed. These seem to get the best results. Also try using location tags. We've done some experimenting with this, and when you tag a location on any one of your videos or your static posts, they tend to get a little bit more reach. Next, let's take a look at Facebook, the old tried and true. So full disclosure, I am born right on the line of the millennials and the Gen X crowd. And if I had to put a generational label on Facebook, I'd probably call it the boomer social platform, but it's also the Gen X social platform. But let's face it, Gen Xers get left out all the time. 10 years ago, every church was investing in building up their number of Facebook followers, thinking that that would lead them to get reach on these people over the years to come. But in reality, Facebook has all but eliminated organic reach on their accounts. In fact, if you have a church Facebook page, you can expect maybe 0.5% of your followers to see any specific post. Some of the pros are it is great for people over 40. That's probably where they're most active to this day. I also find that Facebook events are also still really useful, especially if you have a little bit of budget to put behind it. A lot of people wind up seeing your events. And one of the best uses of Facebook right now is actually not a Facebook page, but setting up a Facebook group. Now, I've seen some churches use this effectively because groups do tend to have a larger organic reach when you put a post on there. I know I personally am part of several groups. I like to fish, so I'm part of a local fishing group here. I'm also part of a church communicators group, but I think there's a big opportunity for churches to set up their own groups, specifically around ministries if your church is large enough. The challenge here is that for groups to get some traction, it needs more than just a handful of members. And be warned, groups can be a little bit hard to moderate sometimes, especially if the conversation starts to go in directions that maybe your church doesn't want it to go. Some of the cons we see on Facebook is it has a really diminishing user base where people under 40 are using it basically almost never outside of things like groups and maybe Facebook Marketplace. It also has a very short shelf life on all of your posts. That's not a mistake, that's by design. Anything you post as a church will be basically invisible after about 48 hours. If you do choose to use Facebook, I would strongly encourage you putting more of your energy into a group than onto your Facebook page. You also probably have to budget at least a little bit of money for some ad spend to promote things like events or posts that you want people to see. And we have also seen some results with Facebook Live. It was one of the pioneers in live broadcasting, but even those results are really starting to diminish in our view, and we actually anticipate that that's going to continue to see fewer and fewer results. But there is some opportunity in the live area still. Well, let's move on to the new kid on the block, and of course I'm talking about TikTok. And we don't know what's going to happen with TikTok here in the United States, but I want to give you my view of it as it stands right now. If you're of the opinion that TikTok is primarily just for dance videos, well, you're mistaken. You still see those on there. They do pop up from time to time, but the algorithm is going to give you what you like to watch. Some of the pros are, at this point, it probably has the highest organic reach of any of the social platforms we're talking about here today. It is right around that same 4% that we were talking about on Instagram, but by today's standards, that's pretty good. It also has a great presence with Gen Z, and that's the generational label I would give this one, the platform for Gen Z. And one thing I think is really great for churches is that it does seem to prioritize authenticity over production value. So even the smallest content creators and smallest churches can get views on their content if they're able to be authentic and just organically interesting. One of my favorite TikTok accounts is Pastor Michael Todd. He does these fantastic 60-second relationship advice clips, and they're really great. I think they're edited down from one of his longer form sermons, but they're the exact kind of content that Gen Z and therefore TikTok really does seem to prioritize. It can be a little bit harder to target locally, and as churches, we probably have a preference to reach people in our community as opposed to people on the other side of the world. There's also some questions about where the platform's going to be long term, and we just don't know the answers to those right now. So I would hate to see you invest a lot in the platform only for it to go away in a few months. So just take that under advisement. Focus on creating universally helpful advice, remembering that most people in your church aren't going to see this content, but people all over the world might see it, which might in turn help more people in your church get connected. Finally, remember, with a TikTok video, make sure you really hook your audience in the first 3 seconds. While this is important for all of these platforms, their algorithm does seem to put the most attention on the first 3 seconds of a video, so make sure you nail that with a super interesting hook. Finally, let's talk about YouTube. Now, they're obviously known for their long form content. In fact, you probably put your sermons on there every week, but they have made a hard pivot to add into their long form content, short form content in what's called YouTube Shorts. Like with their long form videos, the algorithm at YouTube really emphasizes watch time. That's the main thing you need to be focused on for any YouTube content, is how long will someone stay on your video. We're in this new discovery algorithm era where people are going to see the content that the platform thinks they will most like and continue to watch. Some of the pros, in my view, for YouTube is that because it has both long form and short form content, you can introduce your church to people through your short form content and then actually preach the gospel and really connect with them in some of your long form content. One of the things I love about the platform is that of all the other platforms we're talking about, it far and away has the longest shelf life for any content you create. And while that's especially true for long form content, which can tend to perform even better after a year of being published than it did right out of the gate, it also is true to some extent for short form content. We have YouTube Shorts that we published years ago that continue to this day to get results and people searching for them. The reason for that is that YouTube is the second largest search engine, only after Google, which also recommends lots of YouTube videos. It's also really great for establishing what we call thought leadership, establishing yourself as an expert on any given topic. And this is so good for pastors to really lean into. Now, YouTube is not without its cons. It probably requires the most production effort of any of these channels that we're talking about here today. But let's face it, most churches are already doing the production effort because we're filming sermons every single week. In my view, it also takes a little bit more time to build momentum. It's harder on YouTube to go viral on your first few videos than it is on other platforms like TikTok or Instagram. One other con that isn't really a con for churches, but in our experience, YouTube does like to be fed content at least weekly. And the good news is, as a church, you're probably making content every single week anyway, so that probably shouldn't be an issue for you. One of the things I recommend is really focusing on searchable content, and make sure your titles and descriptions are search engine optimized. We see so many churches putting up their weekly sermons and it's titled something like Pastor Joe, August 8th, 2025. That's a terrible title for YouTube because nobody is searching for Pastor Joe, August 8th, 2025. You don't have to really overthink this. Just use some keywords in your titles and try to use titles that are curiosity driven, and you'll tend to see better results. Also, take some time to focus on your YouTube thumbnails. Make sure the words in your thumbnail are not the exact same words that you used in your title. Make them a companion to your title, something that would even up the curiosity so that it's almost irresistible for someone to not click. Also, make sure you remove things like church announcements or church updates from your YouTube channel if they're no longer relevant, because the algorithm does tend to penalize you if you're not making content that is useful to everybody on their entire platform. So when it's all said and done, which platform is the best for churches right now? Well, I have to say, if I was gonna just choose only one, that one should be YouTube. You should be putting your weekly sermons on there, obviously. That's a no-brainer. But on top of that, using platforms like YouTube Shorts and really leaning into your strategy with thumbnails and titles, it can really expand your reach. And the great thing about YouTube is it is hands down the best platform for building trust, which is one of the most important elements when our goal is to engage people with the gospel. YouTube has this unique ability to turn people that are strangers into people that feel like they're almost part of your family. And all of the other platforms, in my view, have a harder time doing that. And hands down, one of the best things about YouTube is that the content you create now could have value for years to come. For us as pastors and leaders of churches, a lot of the things that we're communicating are truly timeless. Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So at a minimum, I think sermons that you put onto your YouTube account could have a lifespan of 4, 5, even 6 years before they maybe start to drop off and see fewer results. If I had to choose a second one, I would probably say Instagram, just because of the millennial and Gen Z reach that it has. And then third and fourth, I would say TikTok, and then Facebook would probably be last, just because of the diminishing results that we're seeing there. So what should a church do? Well, it's probably time to get serious about your social media strategy. And if that's something that you want to take the next step in, well, we have a totally free online strategy review where we actually do a deep dive into all of your social media accounts, give you real world feedback, and then give you marching orders on exactly what we would recommend that you do to improve your social media presence. There's a link down in the description. Answer a couple of questions on that link and we'll get that review out to you right away. If this video has been helpful to you, it would mean a lot to me if you would hit that subscribe button down below. We put out new content like this every single week. Now, don't make the mistake of thinking that just because YouTube is the best platform to be on right now, that it's going to be easy. In fact, it can be really challenging to build an audience on YouTube. You have to go about it the right way. And to help you, we actually did a video where I analyzed the top 100 church YouTube accounts and did a deep dive into what's working, what isn't, and I'll give you some insights on exactly what you can do to see your YouTube channel get those same kinds of results. This is the video that you need to watch next.